Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you guys how I took this old and broken down nightstand and redid it to look like this. I really hope you guys can do this with your old furniture to upcycle it, so keep on watching if you're interested. So as always, my inspiration came from Pinterest. Here are a few pictures. As you can see, I was immediately drawn to this slatted furniture look. So that's what we're going to be recreating today. Step one is to prep the nightstand. I began by removing all of the drawers from it and giving it all a really good wipe down with some vinegar and some disinfectant spray to get off all the oils and dust. And I also removed all of the existing hardware. At this point, I put on some safety goggles, and then I also got this chisel tool, and I got to work with scraping off all of the old paint on this nightstand. This process was working really well, but it was a little time consuming, so I wanted to find something that could possibly make this process go by faster. So after some research, I found this product called Citrus Strip. It's a stripping gel that basically gets off all this old paint and varnish off of a piece of furniture. I wanted to try it out. It was pretty easy to use. All you need to do is just paint on some of this using a paintbrush, and then you let it all sit overnight, and apparently it's supposed to take off all of this paint. But after leaving it overnight, I went ahead and started scraping, and it kind of only took off this black layer of paint and not the others. But I had to go ahead and go back in with a second coat, which eventually took off the white paint and the varnish, which ended up just wasting much more time than if I just started scraping off the paint without this product. I don't know if I used it wrong or if there was some other step that I missed, but I don't really recommend this stripping gel. I would recommend just using a chisel and chipping off all the paint by yourself. Eventually, I was able to get all the paint off, and this is what it looked like. Now it's time to give it a good sand, so I'm starting off with 120 grit sandpaper on my electric sander, and I'm just going through and sanding all surfaces of the nightstand. And of course, after sanding any piece of furniture, you want to wipe it down to get off all the dust and residue that it left over. Next, I'm using this wood filler in a natural color, and I'm filling up all of the holes that the pre-existing hardware was in. I'm also using this wood filler to fill in this little seam that was in between the two drawers that gave the impression that there was two drawers when there was actually just one deep one. So I wasn't really a huge fan of that, so I just filled in that seam with the wood filler as well. Once it dried, I sanded off any extra wood filler to make sure it was all nice and smooth. Now that the nightstand is nice and prepped, step two is to create the slatting for the nightstand. I'm using these 36-inch long wooden dowels. They are squared and they're 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. I got these from the hardware store. Here is the specific one I used. Of course, everything was always linked down below. So I measured out how high my drawer was, and then I took that measurement and translated it onto the wooden dowel. Once I had that all marked out, it was time to start cutting these pieces. I'm using this jig that I actually made in one of my architecture classes, and it just basically allows you to make really straight cuts. It's not 100% necessary, but if you have something like this, I would recommend using it. And I'm also using a small handheld saw to go ahead and just cut out all of these little pieces. Once I have a few to work with, I'm going to go ahead and start attaching these to the drawer. I'm using this Titebond original wood glue. I'm putting a little bit on the back of this piece and then placing it on the edge of the drawer and securing it with a clamp. Then I'm using another piece as a spacer, just placing it there and then gluing the next piece next to it, clamping that and removing the spacer for the next one. For the bottom drawer, I was sure to always be double checking that the slatting was matching up on both sides, just so that everything was nice and straight. The last thing that I did was I took my electric sander and just sanded the tops of them so that it was flush with the top of the drawer. Now it's time for step 3, which is to prime, paint, and seal. This is the primer that I'm using. I highly recommend it. It's linked down below if you guys wanted to use the same. And as for applying it, I'm using a synthetic bristle brush. Make sure to use synthetic because that is what works best with water-based paints. I went ahead and just did a coat of that, and I made sure to go through all of the little nooks and crannies in between the slatting and everything. Once that dried, I'm going in with this Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover Latex paint in the color Almond. And for this one, I'm using a roller because you do not want to have any paint strokes. I'm doing one coat of that paint, and then once that dried, I'm going over with a polyacrylic sealer. This is the satin finish, and it's also water-based, so I'm using a foam brush for that because a roller gives you a lot of bubbles and a bristle brush gives you brush strokes. I let all of those layers dry overnight, and the next day I was ready for step 4, which is adding some hardware. I decided on the placement for them, drilled some holes, and then screwed in my hardware. And it was as easy as that, where I had a brand new nightstand. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys had any questions, please leave them down below, and please don't forget to subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye guys.